In 1959, a New York radio DJ named Peter Tripp decided to stay awake for 200 hours straight, broadcasting live from a glass booth in Times Square as a publicity stunt for charity. By day 3, he was seeing spiders crawling out of his shoes. By day 5, he was convinced doctors were trying to bury him alive, and he genuinely believed his own reflection in the mirror was a different person entirely. He survived, technically, but people close to him said he was never quite the same afterward. And Peter Tripp only made it to about 8 days. So what actually happens if you go past that? What if you genuinely, biologically never slept again? The answer involves your immune system collapsing, your brain quite literally beginning to cook itself, and a real, documented, ultra-rare genetic disease that shows us exactly how this story ends, because unfortunately, we don't have to guess. Let's build this out hour by hour, because the timeline matters enormously. In the first 24 hours without sleep, you're already operating with impairment roughly comparable to being legally drunk. Your reaction time slows, your judgment gets shakier, and your emotional regulation starts slipping in ways you probably wouldn't notice in yourself, but that people around you absolutely would. This is the stage most people have actually experienced, a genuinely rough all-nighter, and it's uncomfortable but fundamentally recoverable. By 36 hours, your body starts making mistakes at a cellular level that go beyond just feeling tired. Your levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, spike significantly. Your immune system, which relies heavily on sleep to function correctly, starts producing fewer of the specific cells your body uses to fight off infection. You become measurably more susceptible to getting sick at the exact moment your body has the least capacity to handle being sick. Your appetite hormones go haywire too, specifically the ones that regulate hunger and fullness, which is part of why chronic sleep deprivation is so strongly linked to weight gain and metabolic problems over time. At 48 hours, something called microsleeps begin, and this is genuinely one of the more unsettling parts of the whole process. Your brain starts forcing tiny, involuntary naps lasting a few seconds each, sometimes with your eyes still open, and you often won't even realize it happened. You could be mid-sentence, mid-task, even mid-drive, and your brain will simply flicker offline for a moment and then flicker back on, and you may have zero memory of the gap. This is your brain attempting to protect itself by stealing rest wherever it possibly can, even if you're consciously trying to prevent it. By 72 hours, the hallucinations that Peter Tripp experienced start becoming common territory. This isn't dramatic movie hallucination, seeing entire fictional people walk around. It's usually simpler and stranger. Shadows moving at the edge of your vision that aren't there, textures seeming to shift or crawl, objects appearing to warp slightly. Your cognitive function at this point has dropped dramatically. Concentration becomes nearly impossible, your speech may become slurred or disorganized, and your emotional state can swing unpredictably between apathy and irritability within minutes. Paranoia frequently sets in here too, an increasing, often irrational suspicion of people around you. Past 4 or 5 days, your brain begins showing something researchers describe as a kind of temporary, functional psychosis. The lines between what's real and what your exhausted brain is generating start blurring significantly. And this is roughly the territory where Peter Tripp's experience took its darkest turn, the paranoid conviction that people were plotting against him, the genuine confusion about his own identity. Now here's where things get genuinely science fiction, because there's a documented human disease that shows us exactly what happens if this continues indefinitely, and it's called fatal familial insomnia. It's an extraordinarily rare genetic disorder caused by a mutation in a specific gene that essentially breaks a person's ability to sleep at all, permanently and progressively, until it kills them. The disease works through prion, misfolded proteins that cause catastrophic damage specifically to the thalamus, the part of your brain responsible for regulating sleep. As the disease progresses, patients move through stages that read like an extended, medically documented version of what Peter Tripp experienced, except with no possibility of recovery. Insomnia that starts mild and gradually becomes complete. Panic attacks and phobias. Hallucinations that intensify over months rather than days. Rapid, severe weight loss. Dementia-like cognitive decline. And ultimately, total inability to sleep at all, followed by death, typically within 7 months to 3 years of the first symptoms appearing. What fatal familial insomnia reveals, in horrifying real-world detail, is that your brain isn't simply resting during sleep, the way your muscles rest when you sit down. Sleep is when your brain performs essential, non-negotiable maintenance that cannot happen any other way. During deep sleep, your brain activates something called the glymphatic system, essentially a cellular cleaning crew that flushes out metabolic waste products, including a specific protein called beta amyloid that builds up in your brain tissue throughout the day. Without sleep, that waste simply keeps accumulating with nowhere to go. This is part of why chronic severe sleep deprivation has been linked to increased risk of neurodegenerative conditions, because your brain, quite literally, doesn't have functioning garbage disposal without it. There's also the temperature regulation piece, and this is where the phrase "the brain begins to cook itself" becomes disturbingly literal rather than just a dramatic metaphor. Sleep plays a critical role in regulating your body's core temperature and your brain's internal thermoregulation specifically. In cases of fatal familial insomnia, patients develop a persistently elevated body temperature that their bodies can no longer bring back down, because the exact biological system responsible for that regulation is being actively destroyed by the disease. So back to the original question. If you genuinely never slept again, starting from that first sleepless night, here's the realistic trajectory. The cognitive impairment would compound daily rather than plateau. Your immune system would become progressively less capable of protecting you from even minor infections. Your hormonal regulation would spiral, affecting everything from your appetite to your stress response to your basic emotional stability. Hallucinations and something resembling psychosis would set in around the 1-week mark and would only intensify from there. Your brain's cellular waste disposal system would remain permanently offline, allowing toxic protein buildup to continue unchecked. And eventually, your body's ability to regulate its own core temperature would begin failing. Total, complete sleep deprivation in humans, sustained indefinitely without any intervention, is essentially, functionally fatal, and the human body appears to have no fail-safe mechanism to prevent this outcome on its own, because under normal biological circumstances, sleep is never actually optional. The brain simply forces it on you eventually, one way or another, through microsleeps, if nothing else. Fatal familial insomnia is genuinely one of the only conditions in existence that removes that fail-safe entirely, and the fact that it kills every single person who develops it tells you something profound about what sleep actually is. Not a lifestyle choice, not a luxury, not time you're simply not being productive, but a biological necessity as fundamental and non-negotiable as breathing. So the next time you're tempted to pull an all-nighter and treat sleep as something optional you can skip and make up for later, it's worth remembering that somewhere in your brain, there's a cleaning crew waiting to start its shift, a thermostat waiting to reset itself, and an entire biological maintenance system that has never once, in the history of the human species, figured out a workaround for skipping the job entirely.